2021, a new year full of potential and hope for the future. So apparently Mass Effect Legendary Edition will have its butt shots removed. Well, that hole won't dig itself. Time to dive into another subject that might get my ass assassinated by the politically correct mob.
I would not rest until the criminal was hanging by his hair, with an oriental disemboweling cutlass thrust up his ignoble behind.
I hope you're listening to all this, Bora.
First, I'll just be summarizing this particular case, because for me there's something deeper here that needs to be addressed.
Somebody has to go down there.
Somebody's got to go down there.
So, let's get into it. BioWare to edit sexualized cutscenes in Mass Effect Legendary Edition. BioWare has confirmed that Mass Effect Legendary Edition will feature edits to some of its more sexualized cutscenes, particularly those involving Cerberus officer Miranda Lawson. Well, that says it all right there, and I could just focus on my analysis from there of this whole situation, but let's go with an article written by someone that has an agenda, who has no idea what he's talking about, just so we have the appropriate image of the generic mindless journalist that supports this without actually understanding a single thing about it. BioWare censors Mass Effect Legendary Edition butt shots and gamers are mad. There we go. Doesn't that just tell you the mindset of the so-called journalists writing this article? A mindless drone if I ever saw one, going after gamers like they're mad without having actual valid reasons to be mad. BioWare has been accused of censoring the upcoming Mass Effect Legendary Edition, because they are, the remaster collection of the original Mass Effect trilogy by removing its gratuitous butt shots. First of all, people's definition of gratuitous varies from person to person. What you might find gratuitous, I might not. Secondly, those shots serve a purpose, that purpose being to portray Miranda as an incredibly sexy femme fatale that knows how to use her sexuality and isn't afraid of it. Also, I would like to draw attention to this photo right here, that was edited and placed here to depict that so-called male gaze in a disgusting way, when in reality this shot is set up like this. Shepard wasn't even looking at her behind, he was looking in her eyes or at least at her face, clearly demonstrating the strong will that would set him on the path to save the galaxy. Because as we all know, the Reaper mind control ability is nothing by comparison to a woman's behind. This removal of various leering camera angles has caused some gamers to cry censorship. Why is that there? With BioWare deciding to make some changes it believes distracted from the story it was trying to tell. Fine, you want to talk about the story? Let's talk about writers' integrity, of sticking with your vision. The original creators of Mass Effect, and more specifically Miranda, wanted to emphasize and promote her sexuality. Now that decision was made, clearly, we got the game. And now they're going back and changing it, indicating a lack of writers' integrity. And this is very important and damaging, because it shows that they don't really care about their vision enough to defend it. They would change and edit anything to satisfy outside factors. They betrayed their vision like it's nothing, but go on, defend them some more. Why BioWare isn't censoring Mass Effect at all. So this is how teachers feel when they receive particularly stupid papers.
The words are wrong, the phrases are wrong, the sentences are wrong, they're not ordered right in the paragraphs aren't coherent, and the whole thing makes no sense.
In an interview with Metro, BioWare project director Mac Walters discussed how certain alterations were being made to the game, specifically regarding its treatment of female characters such as Miranda Lawson in cutscenes. Kevin, Meek character and environment director, actually called out some camera cuts that were just, why was that focusing on Miranda's butt? Because she's hot.
It's just a fact. My reflexes, my strength, even my looks, they're all designed to give me an edge.
Walter said, so in some cases we said, okay, we can make a change there, but ultimately to change an entire character model or something like that wasn't really what? What? Jesus Christ. So basically, to sum up, it's not censorship because it just changes camera angles and not the actual character models. That's still censorship, you muppet! Take it from someone who actually studied propaganda and by extension censorship. Not that you have to, this is a clear example of censorship to anyone with half a brain and the backbone to support it. But just so you know, you can tell a lot with a camera angle. If you're talented enough, you can tell different stories by just tilting the camera. We even came up with names for specific angles, like the Dutch angle, that makes situations seem that much more uncomfortable, eerie or tense. And okay, let's go back a bit. What is the most basic definition of art that you can think of? I'll tell you because you can't answer or think. Art at its core is something made specifically to draw out an emotion or feeling out of its audience. So knowing that, and going back to the angles, you can see that very basic changes like the camera angles are used to draw out certain emotions from the viewer, thereby helping the narrative along. It tells a story within a story, if you will. And obviously you subconsciously think the same or you wouldn't want to change them. You know it's not just a camera angle, and cutting out certain camera angles for whatever reason fits smack down in the middle of the definition of censorship. I can't believe that this so-called journalist has the opportunity to talk about such things with zero knowledge of what he's actually talking about. Is this article written by the janitor in his break? Like, what the hell? An executive editor and you don't know what censorship is? Like, what the fuck? How? Why? Is this a case of nepotism? No wonder the world is in the sorry state that it's in, with misinformation like this at every corner. People trust you to know what you're talking about. Censorship cries from the YouTube outrage machine. Oh yes, please belittle YouTubers with your boundless knowledge. The Quartering, a YouTuber with 1 million subscribers. Oh god, another 2-bit journalist complaining about that guy. Why am I not surprised? In the video he explains how if there is a game with a beautiful woman in it, it will be updated, the implication being that the developers feel forced to remove attractive characters when they modernize old video games. Well, it's because they are. It's self-censorship at best, and I would go a step further and call it a deliberate attack on female sexuality, but more of that in a bit. Let's first just finish this dumbass article. He offers Final Fantasy VII Remake Tifa as an example of this. Well, yeah, I guess it's a good example, only it's a remake in every sense of the word, so I'm more forgiving there, but I can see where he's going with it. Compare this to Mass Effect 3's ending. Oh my god, look, Mass Effect ending was first of all a narrative failure that sabotaged years and years of expectations only to give us a tutorial on how red, green and blue colors can be used to depict the whole spectrum of colors all in the comfort of your own home. So changing that would in no case be censorship if anything, because it would be adding extra things rather than detracting.
If I have 2 beans, and then I add 2 more beans, what do I have?
Some beans.
It's like speaking to a toddler. If you take something away, then you're left without it. And if you add something, preferably something good, then you have more of it. Dumbass executive editor.
The ape creatures of the Indus have mastered this. Now try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. So how many are there?
3.
What?
And that one.
This is ignoring how the character models themselves aren't being altered and the romance scenes are being kept intact. I'm done with this pathetic example of an article. You want to argue that some of the ass shots were inappropriate? Fine, say that. Here, I'll even help your dumb executive editor ass out. While some of the butt shots in Mass Effect might be considered of poor taste, especially when dealing with the sensitive subject matter like family members being in danger, censorship is censorship, and no matter our taste, we don't like seeing it being applied in our games, especially when it has this underlying agenda of demonizing the beauty of female sexuality and the men who are attracted to it. We here at Dumb Fucks Incorporated do not and will not ever stand for that. Signed by the Supreme Executive Editor of the Third Kind. And speaking of that scene where she asks for help to save her sister, have you ever thought that maybe those shots serve the purpose to simulate to the player how it would feel to actually be under her spell? She's a seductive character who knows how to use her charm to get her way, so she's seducing Shepard, but she's also seducing the player, and she does it for good reasons to save her family member. How would you transmit this sort of allure and seductive nature if you just kept the camera on her face the whole time? Not very well, I can tell you that much. And now let's go back to that thing I mentioned earlier about how female sexuality and by extension masculinity are being attacked. So again, I see a lot of people wondering why it matters if an ass shot goes missing here and there. And aside from what I mentioned previously, there's also the issue that people aren't that deep, and what I mean by that is they don't see or want to understand the patterns and their implications and the underlying reasons behind the choice to censor and what that says about our social and cultural dynamic. So let me see if I can explain the issue here. Let's go through my thought process. Now, this is a more abstract idea, but writers, good ones, write from what I believe to be their inner truths. They have a vision and they relay that vision to us. That's how we get characters we immediately despise or immediately fall in love with. because a good writer manages to speak directly from their inner truths to ours, from human nature to human nature. The written word or the images on the screen are in a way in the way. But they are the only way we can communicate to each other what we see when we close our eyes. When we put pen to paper, we're in a constant struggle to depict what we see in our mind's eye to actual words. For Miranda, that truth is that she's an unabashed sexual woman. Her sexuality is transmitted constantly through something that speaks to our human nature. In this case, a more cynical person would say that it talks to our animalistic side of the brain. But there's nothing wrong with that. First, ignoring the fact that humans are also animals with similar needs is a dangerous mistake to make that can lead to a sense of dissatisfaction, of depression, mental illness, and unhealthy behavior on a global scale. But no, I think that this speaks more than to just our animalistic side. It speaks to that inner truth I mentioned earlier. What I mean is, we consciously or subconsciously, be it man or woman, realize that sexual attractiveness is what I would define as a core pillar of femininity, a sort of tool given and upgraded by women with the help of clothing and makeup in order to help them in their lives.
Which is quite sneaky and good of them.
In a way, I would say it's the counterpart of the male physical strength, which I would describe as a pillar of masculinity.
Lord help me, what? You need it on the bridge, sir. Knock on my door! Knock next time! Yes, sir. Did you see anything? No, sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again. Good!
This is especially important since we're talking about Miranda, where that pillar or attribute, characteristic, whatever you want to call it, is important in telling her particular story. And the fact that saying this is a social taboo is telling of a lot of things, and it's what I want to draw attention to in this video. You see, by determining the target behind propaganda and censorship, you can deduce intent. That's the beauty of propaganda and censorship. Once you are able to determine that such tools are being used against you, you can determine who your enemy is and what their goal is. The hard part is to notice them in the first place. Especially with Muppets like this one who claim that this isn't censorship. It is! So what's the intent here? Well, as I've said, I would argue that the intent here is to destroy overt female sexuality by targeting video games and movies, in short, our culture. In fact, I would go so far as call it systemic. And at least when masculinity is being targeted, it's being done up front and doesn't pretend it's being done for our sake. They just call it toxic masculinity and demonize it, and that's it. At least they don't lie. Well, they do, but at least they don't pretend they're on our side. But with women, it's done under the guise of feminism with the end goal of what I could only describe as sexual communism, where the advantages of both men and women are eradicated in the name of equality, which is monstrous and devastating to both sexes. Knowing this makes me question why you would demonize the sexuality of women and the men who are attracted by it, why you would take away such useful tools from women, especially beautiful ones who can use these tools to their full advantage. And this censorship is being promoted by the feminist movement itself. You would think that feminism would promote natural traits of women, such as female sexuality and women's natural affinity towards showing compassion. I know I would. Maybe it's a sort of messed up way to sabotage the women who excel at mastering these traits. Anyways, women are smart. They came up with all sorts of ways to enhance their beauty across different cultures and time periods, and that won't change anytime soon. Just ask your local feminist girl at the gym if you don't believe me, who puts Miranda's outfit to shame. But it will, however, damage our society by denying our natural attraction to each other, and the responsibility to defend such things fall on the individual. And yes, such small things like censoring a butt in a video game matter in the long run. How do you think we got here in the first place? It took time, and they started with other things that people didn't think were important at that time. We also need to call out people who try to lie to us about what censorship actually is. How many people just took this guy's words at face value? Anyways, these are my thoughts on this. Please let me know what you think. Feedback is always nice, and as always, please consider subscribing and have a nice day.